to start day 2, as we felt like this was maybe the perfect way to kick off day 2.
I'm super excited. They both have their headsets on, so we can discuss this at this point. Andre is going to be playing a non-GX Charizard variant, the one from Team Up, the one that has Roaring Resolve. He's playing that archetype, the lone man in the field in day 2, and he's coming up against an Arceus, Palkia, and Dialga variant, the one that's everywhere right now in the field.
For all of you Charizard fans out there, I know you've gotten accustomed to seeing a lot of these Charizard GX tag team Pokemon, but this time it's Charizard on his own. Charizard able to just show that there's no tag team necessary here. We can go from Charmander all the way to Charizard and find a way to still come out on top. There is going to be no GX. Although the deck does have a GX Pokemon in it, Charizard is its main attacker. Make no mistake about it. And well, we just did get to see that Heatran GX there. But Charizard is the main attacker in this deck. We're going to be seeing Andre play a different game than what most of these players in this field are hoping to do. And that's going to put his opponent in a very awkward and uncomfortable situation. Now, one of the main questions is, did he find, and there's the handshake, looks like they are ready to begin. One of the big questions is, did he learn anything from this matchup? Right. And will we be able to see a different outcome from Otavio?
Yeah, absolutely. That's got to be something that plays on his mind. It looks like Andre's going to be kicking us off here. I think he's got a pretty decent start. He's got a couple basics down already. He's got that Jirachi start and also one on the bench. So that's fantastic. Looks like he's deliberating over a Fiery Flint to kick things off.
Indeed. So Andre does get to go first as he won the coin flip, and we see a couple of Pokemon here out of Andre to start things off. Of course, Jirachi with its Stellar Wish ability, just a fantastic way to start this first turn off. And on Otavio's side of the field, we see the namesake of the deck.
Exactly, the main sort of attacker that you can expect from them. Otavio will more than likely be looking to try and get that GX attack off early on in the game because he's up against a non-GX based matchup. So in order to make that prize trade more favorable, you've got to try and use that Altered Creation GX if you want to go anywhere.
Indeed, and this is actually the most popular deck coming into day two. ADP, affectionately, as players affectionately refer to it as, of course, Arceus, Dialga, and Palkia Tag Team GX. Just such a powerful GX attack out of Altered Creation, just a unique attack, if anything, which just opens up the possibilities for so many different play styles here from the ADP deck. But however, Andre, still continuing his first turn, played a Heat Factory and discarded a Fire Energy to draw 3 additional cards. Now we're finally seeing the first Stellar Wish of the game. I am not going to be surprised to see many, many more of these throughout the game, as that is one of the main sources of card advantage from Andre here.
It's really rough. I think his hand was phenomenal if he was able to find himself a Professor Oak setting or any other supporter card. Now he has no supporters in his entire hand. He can grab himself a switch and try and go for that second chance with the second Stellar Wish that's on his board.
Indeed.
But it's not ideal just yet.
How uncomfortable is it to have access to so many cards and still not see a supporter? Of course, Professor Oak set up the ideal supporter on turn 1 here for Andre, as Andre would love to start finding these Charmanders and, of course, a Ditto Prism Star. But if you don't find it, despite looking at all these cards, you just do not feel comfortable passing at the end of your first turn. So, of course, he's going to be playing the switch, Will Andre, to get himself a second Stellar Wish. This Stellar Wish is going to be very important for him. He does not have a supporter in hand quite yet. Really looking for that Professor Oak setup. Will he find it? Or will it be a rough start of the day for him? We'll see a Welder.
Welder at least gets him a few draw pieces. I mean, it's going
to
go on to a Jirachi. You do it for the draw, I think. His hand is just rare candies and some stage 2s right now. I think he's got a Mew in there and just the bunch of Fire Energies that he searched out. So I think he has no other option. I think there's something really interesting with his initial Fiery Flint. He actually got rid of a Pokemon Communication and a Hooper. So he was really just hoping that these Stellar Wishes would get him there.
Oh,
and right now, they're not quite doing it for him.
Yeah, I mean, between the Heat Factory and the Stellar Wishes, really he had access to so many cards. And maybe he was playing the odds, but the odds kind of just did not work out in his favor this time around, and now we're going to be looking at a Welder here. Welder hoping to really draw a lot of fire, no pun intended, from these 3 cards here from Welder. Now, attaching 1 fire, the Charmander would be nice, but it's actually a Charizard, isn't it?
Yeah. Like, he needed at least a Charmander there. Look, he's got 3 of his Charizards in his hand and 1 rare candy, I believe, so he's really in a rough spot.
Yeah, and of course, Cynthia and Caitlin, the supporter he drew for the turn. Geez, man, this is just, it's kind of rough considering playing the Mew before passing the turn. Instead decides to keep it in hand and does wake up the Jirachi. So there's the positive side of variance, right?
Yeah, it's a big break for Otavio. It means that he can like have a bit of a sigh of relief. He can
Sure.
take a breath. He can try and get towards his GX attack without facing down like potentially a knockout. Let's not forget that this Charizard has the firepower to literally do 280 in one turn. With the combination of a welder, a turn attachment, and a roaring resolve, you do get to 280 damage. So knowing that that's not really a threat, he can try and plan out his turn a bit more efficiently now.
So that's the other thing is you know that your opponent is basically one entire turn behind at this point. So you're absolutely right. He does get to breathe a sigh of relief. But here's the most important part: is we're now going to see ADP in potentially all of its glory. Exactly what you want to do here is get an altered creation and not get your Arceus, Dialga, Palkia knocked out. If that happens, you're almost always going to be in at least reasonable shape coming into this mid-game. And it's inevitable at this point. That will inevitably happen. There is no danger for Otavio moving into turn 2.
And it could even be, you know, in the ideal scenario, a turn 1 GX attack if he gets into some Ends Resolve. We see a few in his hand. It would be an Ends Resolve into probably Dede changing to looking for a switching card. And if he can GX on the initial turn here, he'll have huge tempo advantage.
We cannot assume that this Ends Resolve is going to hit, though. Will it?
Ooh,
It finds exactly what
targets.
he needs. Metal Energy and a Water Energy. The other 4 cards getting discarded there.
None of them were switches, which is already really good news for him. So his
None of them
outs
were
are very
switches?
solid. Yeah, one was an escape board. So he can manually attach for turn here, and then he can go for a Dede change and hope to find himself a switch.
Oh, indeed. So it's about as ideal an Ends Resolve as he could have had.
Right.
Gets both energies there and does not discard any switches. So that potential is still there. Of course, attaching a Metal Energy onto the active
I like
ADP.
this. It just means that if he misses the switch here, he can just, you know, he's much more likely to find a water for next turn.
Sure.
So if he doesn't get the turn 1 GX attack, he's basically secured that turn 2.
Here's Dede change. Will he find the switch in order to get this turn 1 altered creation? Does not. It doesn't seem.
No, I'm pretty sure he would have slammed it as soon as
Yeah.
possible.
So that is Chaotic Swell instead. Getting rid of that Heat Factory, of course. Chaotic Swell just so powerful. And we're starting to see why. Now Jirachi comes down onto the bench, but that's a pass from Otavio. So as solid as that turn looked at the very beginning, Andre has now got to be breathing a sigh of relief himself, as now he's potentially going to have an extra turn himself. Now, here's where we start looking for Professor Oak setup again from Andre.
Yep.
He still needs to find these Charmanders. They're very important, and it seems like, well, what did he?
Rosa's the selection.
Oh, Rosa, yeah.
Rosa only live once you suffer knockouts, so it's not a fantastic choice for him once again. Looks like Otavio actually got a big deal. He got the Chaotic Swell into play to bounce the Heat Factory because Andre really is running on fumes right now.
Right.
And having that limited to him is a really big deal. Andre actually plays no other stadium cards, so that Chaotic Swell is going to be in play for the rest of the game now.
Seems like we're for sure going to be seeing a Cynthia and Caitlyn now, right? Or is there another?
He's got
switch
another
in hand?
switch in hand. Yeah,
There is
he's
another
got
switch.
one more
There's the
chance.
other switch. These switches are actually somewhat important too throughout the remainder of the
He
game.
only plays
so
2 switches and
yeah.
1 escape board, so.
So that's a lot of resources kind of going away. Now
There's
I think
one.
we found the Professor Oak setup finally.
Here we go. Now we can talk about the supporter in a bit more detail. It allows you to search the deck for 3 Pokemon that have different types, and you get to put them directly onto your bench. Because he's already developed 2 Jirachi, it's maybe not as strong as potentially a Professor Elm's Lecture, but you can see he's actually playing the Psychic Salandit, so he can go ahead and grab Ditto, a Psychic Salandit, and a Charmander here, so perfect from him to really get things going.
Very well-built deck, I think, is probably
Yeah.
the best way to really talk about Andre Pimenta's deck. Like, he maximizes the use out of these cards like Professor Oak setup, that Salander, plus, of course, Ditto just being so fantastic in this deck with so many different evolution lines. And, of course, Charmander, the most important card that Andre's been searching for and has been unable to find until just now. So, of course, despite having to spend these resources, these very important resources like both switches, finally starting to see some return on that investment, as now we've seen the setup, we've seen the supporter played for the turn, and we may just see a pass here, but Andre's feeling very nice, very happy about this turn.
Yeah, and I think one difference about Charizard going into this format, obviously Andre's made some clever tweaks. He's added in a couple of Rosas. He's got himself this new Professor Oak setup-based engine. But the thing that really changes is that Custom Catcher isn't in Otavio's deck list. This lone Charmander would be very, very vulnerable in previous formats. Now he knows that he can freely just wait on this Charmander, get it into a Charizard freely, and start swinging when he's ready. So Otavio, he can't really do anything about this Charmander. It's just going to become a Charizard eventually. He's even aware that Andre picked up that Rosa last turn, so it's got to be something he's expecting here. As we see, he simply has a very simple and effective turn. He attaches that water energy to the active, goes for the Altered Creation GX. So he has that hidden 30 damage buff for the rest of the game, and he'll be taking an extra prize card every time he gets a knockout.
Looks like Jirachi's still asleep at the start of Andre's turn, and we see the rare candy Charizard that couldn't come down fast enough, as Andre's been holding on to that since turn 1. Of course, you're absolutely right. This is a very comfortable situation, I guess is probably the best way to put it for this Charizard deck, as we knew that he was going to find the rare candy Charizard. We knew that even if he didn't have it already in his hand, Otavio knew that he was going to run into that if he ever knocks out this Jirachi with that Rosa. But because Rosa's still in hand, you can start to assume that there's going to be a steady stream of Charizards from here on out, which makes you wonder, is Andre really favored in this particular position?
I think when there are two tag teams on Otavio's side of the field, he must be. Andre can have a very simple game plan of knock out two tag team Pokemon. Great Catch is obviously a card that he's playing in his list these days, which is definitely going to help out that sort of strategy. So it can be as simple as making two Charizards, pile up the energies on them and take two big knockouts to win the game. And Otavio, has to try and find a way to disrupt that.
Yeah, normally Otavio relies on cards like Keldeo GX, for example, to disrupt his opponents. But because Charizard, of course, is not a GX, that game plan's at the window. And yes, you have a weakness advantage, but we've seen throughout the weekend that doesn't necessarily mean much. These fire decks just have so much power behind them.
This could be a monstrous turn. He picked up the escape board from the last switching out he had available to him, so I think he can actually score a knockout here. He's yet to play a supporter. I think there's a full welder in hand.
There's that welder, so
that's
yes,
5 energy.
Right.
Wow.
That's 4 energy currently. He still needs 1 more to attach from hand.
Oh, you're right, you're right.
So he's still looking for 1 more energy.
He has 5 crystal in hand, I'm pretty sure, as well. I think he's just there.
Not yet. Not yet.
Ooh,
still looking for 1 more energy. Needs that 1 more energy. Will he find it? It doesn't seem like it.
We'll just check the discard pile. There is 1 fire in there, so he could burn the fire crystal just to score this 3-prize knockout if he chooses to.
Oh, you do. You absolutely do. There is no doubt about it. Because the fire crystal's in his hand, we are going to see that manual attachment from... Well, oh no, it's already there. It was just hidden.
Oh, it was there the whole time?
It was just hidden under the Charmander, so there is 5 fire energies. That means a big knockout here from Andre Pimenta. The first tag team knockout of the day is our first knockout of the day. And that means Andre Pimenta goes down to 3 prizes remaining against Otavio's 6 still. And remember, Andre still has a Rosa in hand. Andre still has that Ditto in play. There's plenty more to come from Andre here. Otavio has to find his way out of here.
He's got such a fantastic setup. He's got that skateboarded Jirachi. He's got himself Salazzle. So Otavio, he's just going to have to hope that something like a reset stamp sticks. But Andre's already pretty prepared for that, to be honest.
Oh, yeah. He absolutely is, especially with like the Charmander already on the bench. There's still a Ditto there that could eventually turn into a Ninetales if the game gets a little bit weird. There's some positives coming out of Otavio's side, by the way. Otavio has 150 damage attack, and Charizard has 150 max HP. So, and this is potentially an attack that can power up additional attackers. So if your opponent can't find ways to one-hit knock you out, then at that point maybe you can get some interesting little Mallow and Lana plays or something along those lines to kind of steal a game away from Andre. But it's going to be very difficult to do so if you're playing around or if you're playing against something as strong as Rosa in these prize exchange wars.
Absolutely, and we see Otavio doesn't quite have the reset stamp yet in his hand. I think he's going to play this Pokegear first, try and thin any supporter card possible, then try and Stellar Wish towards that stamp, because I think that's the only way I can foresee him making some form of comeback here. Let's not forget, he's still 3 attacks away from winning the game, so if he's able to, score the knockout this turn, a slow turn from Andre, suddenly he's in good shape himself.
Indeed. It's absolutely not over whatsoever, but that was just a huge turn from Andre to really put the pressure on Otavio. And now, if Otavio does find a way out of this, then we're right back in it. But I mean, keep in mind, we're facing down a Charizard still. Charizard, with its ability, has a way to just keep this pressure coming, and that's so important. This is a very powerful Stage 2 Pokemon that we just don't really get to see in action, but the reality is that this isn't a fluke. This deck is the real deal, and it's extremely powerful when it gets going.
We're going to see a Cynthia Caitlyn first to draw 3 cards. He can also go ahead and grab a supporter from his discard pile, put it straight back into his hand. I don't think there's like many valid targets that he's realistically looking for. He's going to grab a Mallow and Lana, and we already know that Andre just goes way over the top with damage. He doesn't really need the switching too much. So he's going for the draw 3 here. Again, reset stamp is the really thing that he's hoping for here.
So if he finds a reset
Oh, he's got
stamp,
one. He's got one from the 3 from Cynthia and Caitlyn. That's huge.
Okay, so he did find that reset stamp, which was really important. That's going to limit Andre's hand size and, more importantly, really put pressure on the Jirachis from here on out. So that's kind of Andre's way out of this reset stamp situation. But again, that's more things that Andre's going to need to draw in order to really recover once this Charizard is knocked out, as he's no longer going to have that Rosa in hand potentially.
Yeah, Otavio is making it so that Andre has to find Rare Candy, he has to find Charizard, he has to find Welder, he's got to find a manual attachment on top of that. It's a lot of things to find all at once.
Does Otavio have an escape board?
Yeah, he's already got the guaranteed movement there. He's got the escape board in his hand. He can already Stellar Wish quite happily now. I think from this point on, all you want to find is like your second reset stamp, just in case that somehow, you know, the first one doesn't really work out for you.
And I think he found it.
I think there's not much else that's valuable at this point. Potentially the switch just to give yourself more options, but it really does feel like the reset stamps are going to be crucial here for him to mount a comeback.
Yeah, I mean, if you truly need to, you have Mallow and Lana. Really, I think, is there any value in finding a secondary attacker, like maybe like a Keldeo, for example?
Yeah, he's done a few Cherish Balls already in this turn, so I think he does have that backup Keldeo. So it's only really this turn where he's in fear of losing the game outright.
Right.
Then he'll go for the Arceus Palkia and knock out this turn, power up that Keldeo, and if Andre has one slow turn, it adds a great catcher into the mix of things that he needs to be able to win the game.
You're absolutely right. So here's Otavio finally promoting that Arceus Dialga and Palkia Tag Team GX. We've seen the first one get knocked out. This one's coming back for a little bit of revenge here against this Charizard, as we're going to see a return knockout from Otavio. Remember, because it's a GX, normally you would only take one prize against it, but Altered Creation GX just kind of changes the way that this game is going to get played, and that's going to be a 2-prize knockout from Otavio at the end of this turn.
Ooh, and I really don't see much. I just see a few Charizards right now from Andre's hand. The reset stamp seems like it's stuck.
Yeah, there's so many different things that you're going to need if you're Andre. You're going to need not only a rare candy for your
It's all
for your
Pokemon.
Yeah, it is all Pokemon, it seems. We didn't get a great look at it, but it definitely seemed that way. It looks like, if it's all Pokemon, I'm just Stellar Wishing first.
Yeah, that's all you can do.
I would not evolve into a Charmeleon yet.
Obviously, all these energies are going on to that Keldeo.
I think the ideal card to find here if your Jirachi is, I mean, it's got to be a supporter.
Okay, he's evolving into Charmeleon.
But he's evolving the Ditto into Charmeleon, right?
Yeah. This is keeping the options open for him to find Rare Candy off the Stellar Wish.
But, I mean, I wouldn't necessarily evolve before Stellar Wishing, though. I guess it's kind of my...
Yeah, that's fair. So he has the choice of either Rare Candy and start getting Roaring Resolve going, or go for the Tantalizer. I actually like the Rare Candy, guarantee that you're getting some energy powered up.
Exactly.
And then you've got the other Stellar Wish that you'll just sort of end your turn on.
Sure.
And if you do hit a supporter, excellent, pretty much.
All right, so that Rare Candy will will get this Charizard into play, and then I expect to see the ability before a second Stellar Wish.
Exactly.
Remember, Andre does not have unlimited resources. He's been spending a lot of resources very uncomfortably at the start of this game, since he did not have a very powerful turn 1.
He's going to freely retreat. He has to Roaring Resolve first.
Wow,
he's going to go for the Stellar Wish first.
Yeah. Hopefully we don't see multiple fire energies. Hopefully it's not something that really messes with him. See one fire energy there. See a fire crystal. He can go ahead and start using the Roast Reveal from the Salazzle now. That's definitely a good pickup for him. He can get a manual attachment involved as well, at the very least. So his turn's not done. He's still not used a supporter, and he's seeing 3 more cards here. Yeah, and he still hasn't used Roaring Resolve yet.
Yeah, exactly.
So hopefully he doesn't forget to. I mean, I think that...
It depends on how many Fire Energies he still has remaining in his deck. We know he plays a couple copies of Fire Crystal as well as a couple copies of Fiery Flint, and there is at least 5 fires in his discard pile, so I imagine there's still plenty.
Yeah, he still has plenty. There's no shortage of fire energies in his deck. Matter of fact, I think about half his deck is probably fire energies.
Well, he's going to go for the Salazzle ability first.
And that Salazzle ability could find him quite a bit more heat.
Oh, I think he got a
Onto
Rosa.
Charmander.
That could be really good.
Yeah, that Rosa is very, very powerful, potentially very important on the following turn.
It can get him a Welder for next turn.
I'm starting to get really worried here.
I think he's pretty... I mean, it's really good news that Otavio got himself that second reset stamp, because otherwise he'd be in horrible shape right now. It feels like Andre's going to use this Rosa to set up the win for next turn.
Sure.
As well as, you know, get an extra Roaring Resolve going.
Looks like he's eyeing down an energy recycle here.
Yeah, it depends how many energies he still has remaining in his deck. I think there's got to be a couple. Yeah, there's at least one. Yeah, okay, there's like 3, I think, in there. So
okay, so
he can pull one out with the Rosa and just Roaring Resolve the other 2. Looks like he's eyeing up a Jirachi as one of his Pokemon, so he can get himself extra Stellar Wishes. The Energy Recycler is actually the trainer that he chooses, rather than going for the guaranteed Welder, perhaps.
Yeah.
Which could have like secured game a bit more.
I think if you think about it with one ability from the Charizard this turn and then the following turn,
Right.
potentially just assuming he won't need the Welder and just kind of wants
I
to
guess
make
the
sure that
Recycler also means that you have better outs so that you can use Salazzle to draw
Yes,
as well.
exactly.
So that's a very fair play.
So
There's that Roaring Resolve, getting the last 2 Fire Energies out of his deck before he uses that Energy Recycler. He's done all he can really to put himself into a good spot to close this game, because we have to remember that this Charizard will not be picked up off the bench. That's going to stay there for sure.
So it does seem like he's faced a tiny bit of a shortage of fire energies towards
Right.
towards this side of the turn. So now at this point, we're going to want to pay attention to how he uses the resources to recycle these fire energies back. Because remember, you discard a lot of fires in order to get these knockouts. Of course, if he can get a knockout on Arceus Palkia, no big deal.
Right.
No harm done. All you need is one more knockout. But if you're forced to go through, say, a Keldeo,
Then it
then
gets
things
a
get a little
squeaky.
bit. Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
for sure. So it's going to be Andre putting all those fire energies back into his deck. It means that, as you said, he could guarantee a Roaring Resolve next turn. He'll have good outs to Roast Reveal in the following turn. And it's down to him to try and find that great catcher, because there's no doubt that Otavio is going to come back. He's going to move into that Keldeo for a knockout this turn, take 2 more prizes, put Andre on a 1-turn clock, and also force Andre to find a gusting effect.
Indeed. So now Otavio, because we know he's already got the reset stamp in hand, I expect that to be the very first card played
It's got to
out
be.
of his hand. Just such an important card here. You've seen your opponent just Rosa.
It could be, again, a very simple turn. The Mallow and Lana for a single switching effect, no discards, nothing to heal. You can get your Stellar Wish in just to, again, thin the deck a little bit more. Reset stamp Andre down, because you've seen him use a Rosa.
Right.
And just hope that you can, again, limit that hand for that 1 turn you need to close the game.
This is really where the lack of something like a custom catcher or something like that
Exactly.
starts to really hurt Otavio here.
And you have to give props to Andre for identifying this as one of the sort of gaps in the metagame. We've seen a few people, Stefan Ivanov, for example, playing Quagsire in this metagame, where when it doesn't get targeted, it gets way stronger. We've seen Zev
Exactly.
Striker being tapped into deck lists for the same exact reason, and Andre's gone all out with that approach, saying, everybody's going to be playing Great Catcher. I can build up huge non-GXs on the board now, and I won't ever get punished for it.
Indeed, and that's we're seeing the beauty in action here as Andre's just powering up these Charizards with absolutely no worries whatsoever. Of course, it would just be unfathomable to assume that there's going to be double, custom catcher coming out of your opponent. So, as long as you don't get any Heat Ran GXs into play, you're going to be fine if you're Andre. And that's kind of the situation that Otavio finds himself in. At this point, does Otavio just kind of resign himself to having to use Keldeo for a knockout and hope that there isn't any other...
That's all he can do, I think.
Yeah.
Limit Andre to 1 Stellar Wish, possibly a Roast Reveal, and make him have everything all at once. It's basically just the Great Catcher. That's the only card that Andre has to find, right?
Right, and what's very important is that this Jirachi's getting knocked out. So
Yeah.
you only have 1 Stellar Wish available to you. This Jirachi is going to have to pull a lot, very heavy duty.
Yeah.
We're
We're not there yet.
Catcher yet.
So he can Roaring Resolve first, then he can
Yes, very
use
important to
the
Roaring Resolve
Fiery
first.
Flint after that. He can
Now,
then go
does
for
he
a
have any
Roast
fires left
Reveal.
in his deck?
He energy
used-
recycled
he used the energy
last
recycle
turn.
already.
And that's going to be paying huge dividends now.
Yeah, no
It's going to be
kidding.
fantastic. He can pull all of the energies out of his deck. He's already got a Welder for potential draw. I imagine he'd be using the Salazzle first.
Right.
And then a Stellar Wish on top of that. So he could be seeing like, what, 11 or so cards here to try and close the game.
Right. Sequencing is very important, though.
Kicks it off with that Roaring Resolve.
Exactly.
That
Roaring
means he's
Resolve
at
first.
5 energies, so he can knock out the Arceus Palkia Dialga with the amount of energies in play. Fiery Flint going to thin
Fiery
all of
Flint.
the remaining fires out of his deck.
Yeah, no more fires are going to be left in the deck by the end of this the sequence, which is going to mean Salazzle's going to have basically as good an odds as possible to get this Great Catcher.
Yep. And I think you have one additional out if you weld a second.
Looks like he's keeping one fire in the deck.
That's a really odd decision because I really don't. I guess he could evolve the other Charizard and get another Ring Resolve in for like thinning purposes, but you would just take the full 4, I think, there.
Yeah, I mean, if you're going to thin, you might as well thin now.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's got to be some sort of decision making going on there from Andre. But yes, putting 3 of his 4 fire energies from his deck into his hand, thinning his deck out almost as much as possible. And now Salazzle, here we go.
Drawing 3. It's a big 3
Roast
cards.
reveal, draws 3 cards. Is there a Great Catcher here for the game?
Great Catcher.
Maybe.
Or Rosa.
I
Those are
might
the
have seen
outs.
it.
He's
No, I did
no,
not.
quite there. It's going to be a big Stellar Wish now.
All right, Stellar
Stellar
Wish.
Wish before trying to use Welder here because, again, Rosa is an additional out for him currently.
Indeed. So remember, Rosa or Great Catcher. Those are the 2 cards we're looking for. Those mean game in favor of Andre here. I don't see it yet.
Ooh, it's the last
there it is, the
card.
final card. There's that Great Catcher, which means we're going to see Game 1 go to Andre Pimenta as he takes down a second Arceus Dialga and Palkia. And that means game, my friend, as we are now going to be going on to Game 2 between Andre Pimenta and Otavio Gouveia. Remember, Andre Pimenta playing this Charizard deck, the Stage 2 Charizard deck that we are just not used to seeing, but we are seeing it in all of its glory here as it's getting 2 big tag team GX one-hit KOs, and that's all he needs. All you need is 2 big tag team one-hit KOs, and that's game, my friend.
I love how excited we've been this entire weekend talking about decks that can win in 3 or 4 attacks. We've been talking about Arceus Palkia Dialga, how strong it is, being up to GX and then attack, 2 times after that to close the game. We've been talking about this new Naganadel Guzzlord archetype. They're trying to use Beastbringer, and they're trying to use the GX attack for the game. All of those things are less attacks than Andre just used to close a game. 2 is all he needed to close the game.
Yeah, we are in a wide open format if I've ever seen one. This format is full of big attacks and big HP, and nothing gets bigger than Charizard's attack there, dealing 280 damage on a single turn.
Yeah,
Unreal.
It's so
and it
scary.
did it multiple times.
And as you saw, Andre has a great draw engine behind him as well. The reset stamp is the only thing you can do. Cross your fingers, and hope that they can't find it all. But Andre had the board completely perfectly developed so that he just had to chill with his Charizard. He could just use Roaring Resolve to get him over the line, and that's all he needed.
Unreal. Just, I was excited coming into this round. I really was. I saw the deck, and I was hoping we would get a good match out of the deck. I knew that there's a reason why he's 6-2-1 and has had a couple of losses, because it's not this unbeatable deck. It's still, at the end of the day, a Stage 2 deck that requires rare candy and it requires a bit of a setup. But when we saw that Rosa, we realized this is the missing key. This is the missing puzzle piece.
There's some really cute additions in the deck. There's only a couple new cards in here. You're seeing the one of Cynthia Caitlin. We're seeing a couple Rosa in here. And those Professor Oak setups. Those are the only differences from previous Charizard builds, but it's more so the meta that's shifted around him that's made him far more of a threatening archetype.
Indeed, and to be honest with you, although you're absolutely right, Rosa is just such a powerful card in this deck.
Yeah.
When you need things like rare candy in order to keep these Stage 2 decks coming, that's kind of where they always fell apart at the end of it. In the previous formats, you can knock out the first Stage 2, and then they're going to need so many other cards. That reset stamp just is such a huge foil to a lot of these strategies. But when you combine Jirachi's Stellar Wish and things like Rosa and whatnot, you just see this onslaught of Charizards, this army of onslaughts just coming at you. And when they each provide one prize, there's just very little you can do.
Absolutely. So as long as Andre, last game he kicked off with 2 Jirachis, that obviously helped his cause towards getting into a decent setup. He did miss initial Professor Oaks, but at least he found it eventually and got some Pokemon into play. We'll see, really, Otavio is just hoping that getting the initiative here, going first, and with maybe a slower start from Andre, he can try and get this game back and go towards a game 3.
Here's the handshake. Game 2 about to begin. Otavio Gouveia down 1-0 against Andre Pimenta. Remember, Otavio playing the most popular deck here in day 2.
He started a Lucario Melmetal. That's not ideal. It's obviously weak to fire and is a tag team, so Otavio's in that same spot already as he was last game. There's 6 prizes already on the board, and this game it's even easier for Andre to close.
Yeah, to be fair, I don't think Andre usually struggles too much to get to 280 damage no matter what. So a tag team knockout's a tag team knockout, but it does, it does put a little bit less pressure on Andre to need a combination of cards. Now you can do without a welder, for example. With that said, of course, this is the one kind of addition to the deck that Otavio had that not every ADP deck plays.
Right.
Lucario and Melmetal is just not a card that you're going to be seeing throughout the entire weekend necessarily. However, in this particular situation, you just have to feel like, oh man, why did I add it?
Yeah.
Why am I in this spot? This is the worst possible time in order for Lucario and Melmetal to come out to play, and it's going to be a little bit uncomfortable here for Otavio, and it's also going to mean that Great Catcher and the late game specifically is going to go much easier for Andre, potentially.
Yeah, that Lucario Melmetal, absolute champion versus Gardevoir and Sylveon matchups. He can basically carry you to 6 prizes because he's so tanky and can simply one-hit KO. Otavio, he goes for a Cynthia here. He's got himself a switch and a Water Energy for next turn, so it's not the worst hand to sort of sit on. He can also go ahead and Cherish Ball for a Dene as well if he wishes to get a fresh hand, but I think he's pretty comfortable here right now, all things considered.
So it does find that the Dene could potentially Dede change, but like you said, he is sitting very comfortably at this point, has pretty much everything he needs for a turn to Altered Creation GX.
He's going to switch into his Jirachi and go for a Stellar Wish as well.
Of course, Jirachi able to Stellar Wish, and then he can end his turn. Jirachi's Stellar Wish ability will find him any trainer card he finds in these top 5.
Oh, wow, okay.
Looks like it's an end resolve.
Yeah, he's going down this route either because he's going to go for a Dede change this turn, or he's saying that perhaps the GX stack isn't the right move to try and win this matchup. Perhaps I need to go for early Ultimate Raise and just deplete Andre of his board before he even gets set up, because Andre's got a Charmander and a Ditto Prism Star. We've seen how scary it can be if he gets into these Jirachis and gets Stellar Wishing and gets the board developed. So if Otavio can just sort of ignore the prize race aspect and just try and deplete the board straight away, he'll be in good shape. But Andre's already got himself a Professor Oak setup, so maybe that strategy's off the table already.
Yeah, and we did see Otavio pass the turn after Stellar Wishing there. And Andre starts things off with his Professor Oak setup. We've seen how powerful Professor Oak setup is in this deck in the past. Of course, able to find himself pretty much every basic Pokemon in his deck. There's very few combinations that he can't find.
I really like the Psychic Salandit. It's a really cute addition. It means now he can go ahead and get a Jirachi, a Salandit, and a backup Charmander. Looks like those are the 3 selections here. And it just really sets his board up very nicely.
So yeah, Salandit, of course, normally the Fire type, but of course in this particular case he chose to go with the Psychic type in order to aid that Professor Oak setup even further, and that was just such a smart decision. As we see,
I think you have to applaud the deck building, over and over. Really. I think it's really, really smart plays and little tweaks that really has made Andre come this far and maybe even further in the tournament. He's still unbeaten, don't forget. He's got a 5-0-4 record in the Swiss rounds.
Right. I always just like to count it as 6-2-1 because it's much easier for me, and I've been. This is what after 20 years you're used to seeing.
Sure.
But the truth is, yeah, you're not wrong. He technically has yet to be defeated, despite having a record that's equivalent to Otavio's 6-2-1. And that just goes to show that, one, catching your opponents by surprise is very important and very, very powerful still. And 2, this deck's the real deal.
Absolutely, and we see a decent selection for Andre there. Looks like he's going to grab the rare candy again. We have to stress that Andre only plays that one stadium, so Otavio has instantly sort of denied it for the entire game with the early Chaotic Swell placement. So Rare Candy has to be the selection here. I believe he has other Rare Candies already in his hand. I think it's the Charizard pieces that he's lacking so far.
Rare Candy.
He might already have one. No, I think he's just... Yeah, his hand's really not good, actually.
What were the contents of his hand?
I think there was like the Energy Recycler, a Hooper, and just a couple Rare Candies and a Fire Energy. So if Otavio does go the aggressive route and goes for an End Resolve and attack here rather than a GX attack, he could actually catch Andre out a little bit here. But obviously, we have that sort of knowledge, and he may not.
Yeah, and at the same time, you have to believe that Great Catcher, the Stellar Wish target of choice, not as stellar as it could have been. However, you have to believe that Otavio feels like Altered Creation GX is still likely the way to go. Like, what are you gonna do? Knock out a Jirachi? How's that gonna, how's that really gonna strengthen your position?
It's the difference between like tempo with taking like a guaranteed prize here, or like long game plan. Really, we see that if the Charizard deck is fully set up, it probably should be beating Otavio, all things considered. But regardless, Otavio missed a guaranteed switching effect, so he's forced to go for this Malolana route and GX anyways, so it's kind of a moot point at this stage. But at the end of the day, Altered Creation still very strong, puts him on a 3-turn clock, makes Andre still draw pretty well.
Yep, and Jirachi stays asleep at the start of Andre's turn. Doesn't stop it from Stellar Wishing one more time, though. And now Stellar Wish really hoping to get Andre out of this kind of uncomfortable situation.
Absolutely. I think
sticky situation.
Yeah, he top decked a Welder for turn, but he may still take this second one. He can Welder for just one energy. He's doing it like as much for the energy as he needs to draw here, because at the moment he's just sat on Rare Candies. He's trying to look towards Pokemon Communications or Charizards, even trying to get that Salazzle developed. These are all the big pieces that he's looking for right now.
Yeah, something like, I mean, this may be wishful thinking, but if that Welder can find him something like a Fiery Flint and like a Pokemon Communication or just a Salazzle in general, he'll be looking to be in fine shape. But that is a little bit of pressure here onto that Welder, and it looks like the 3 cards found are just the 3 cards found are just not what he wants to find.
A backup Jirachi's good. That definitely helps him out, but this is not really as barnstorming as he was last time, that's for sure.
And you know what? Despite the backup Jirachi obviously not being a bad card, it's still you're about to give up 2 prizes.
Right.
Which means your opponent's got 2 more knockouts to go after knocking out this Jirachi. Your opponent's now going to have a field full of energies. This is looking like it's going to be Otavio's game.
Yeah, this is looking much more favorable, especially if Otavio can find himself a Keldeo. Once again, just find him a non-3 prize attacker that can like go through to the following turn to make Andre, once again, have everything at once.
Right.
You see an Ends Resolve here as Otavio's selection.
It looks like he doesn't have any energies in hand, so if he misses the energy here, we may miss a knockout from Otavio. Of course, unlikely to happen, and it does not, as we found 2 water energies.
Yep.
And
he can only go to the bench, of course, the Ends Resolve. I think he does have energies in hand.
I think he has energy switch, I thought.
He's got 1 metal, I believe.
Oh, a metal in hand, got it.
Yeah. He's also got the Dene, but I think, again, Reset Stamp's the only critical card that can make you come back. So I think he's got to sit on this hand and just go for an Ultimate Ray here. As tempting as it is to look for a Keldeo, it's harsh. I feel like...
You can maybe play the Dene.
His other Reset Stamp is prize. That's my only issue.
Does he know this, though? You know?
There is that. We know. We get the cams.
And at the same time, he's going to be taking prizes quite often. So he may find his Reset Stamp.
That's true. That's true. I think he did find a Keldeo as well, so that's worked out pretty nicely for him.
Right. So that Keldeo, of course, is gonna come down. Cherish Ball, of course, is gonna find potentially that Keldeo or another. And yeah. So at this point, he's absolutely hoping to find this last Reset Stamp. I think he's looking through his deck and realizing that the Reset Stamp is not in the deck.
There's essentially 0 cards that help him as an entire deck at this point.
Yeah.
0 cards help him. After he's used Ultimate Ray to get energies, it's literally just, I'm going to attack you with this guy, I'm going to try and attack you with a Keldeo, and I hope that I find a Reset Stamp from my prize cards, because that's all my deck can do against you at this point.
I think also, though, Otavio's got to have realized that Andre's hand is just awful. There's no secrecy behind that anymore.
Yeah.
We've seen nothing but Stellar Wishes for 2 turns. We've seen still a field full of basic Pokemon.
Well, when you see a Rare Candy, you see a Rare Candy. It's the beauty of Stage 2 decks. You know when they're doing well because they're just on the board.
That's absolutely true. So Otavio maybe just hoping that Andre misses for one last turn, and if he does so, then this is going to be smooth sailing from Otavio from here on out.
Yeah, Andre cannot afford another slow turn here. He will straight up have no win condition from then on.
Indeed. I think, as a matter of fact, if I'm Otavio and I miss this turn, I'm just scooping my cards up right away.
Oh, he picked up the reset stamp as well. Some really nice prizes for Otavio there. So that's like the perfect spot he could be in. Basically the same spot he was last game, but this time he has the 6 prize card buffer rather than just the 3.
Chooses to use a welder right away. This welder attaching 2 fires onto that
Ooh, he's on
Charmander. Finds a Charizard. Already has the rare candy in hand.
So Stellar Wish,
Stellar
Wish to find a switching card is all we're after now. He's got a Stellar Wish to find a switching card.
Yeah, no escape
He
board
has
in hand
no
yet.
manual attachment either, so he can't just pay retreat out of Jirachi.
All right, that's Stellar Wish. 5 cards. Does he find an escape board?
There.
It looks like he does.
Wow.
All right, that escape board going to be huge here for Andre, as it's going to allow him to retreat that Jirachi. Of course, we already have a rare candy and a Charizard in hand, which means this Charizard, at some point in this turn, is going to be knocking out this Arceus, Dialga, and Palkia, which means we're going to be in a very similar situation to what we were in Game 1.
I think the key difference is right now, Andre doesn't have that backup Charmeleon. He doesn't have that Salazzle on board just yet, so he's like really all in on this Charizard, and this is where Otavio's reset stamp should be much, much more effective.
While you're not wrong, remember he has yet to use any Rosas. That's really
that's true.
There's a lot of solid top decks left in Andre's deck, basically because he's just drawn so poorly for the first few turns.
I'm actually seeing a Heatran hit the board as well here.
Roaring Resolve.
It doesn't affect the prize race, so he's just trying to thin cards right now.
All right, here's the Roaring Resolve. Going to find 2 more Fire Energies, thinning the deck out even further. Remember, they're contrary to Otavio's deck, which is just full of basically nothing but dead cards that are just irrelevant for him. Andre's deck is just full of nothing but fire.
Yeah. The deck
is
hot right now,
by the way.
that's for sure.
And there's so many different cards you can find. Of course, looking for that Salazzle. Of course, looking for a Rosa. All of these cards are going to be crucial for Andre after that timely reset stamp found by Otavio in the prizes. This is going to be a very close end of the game.
I was going to say, you don't want them on the board, not in the hand from the Roaring Resolve.
This is going to be about as close as you could possibly get. Remember, the Stage 2 Charizard going up against the Tag Team ADP.
It's a big knockout once again. Like, you can't underestimate how powerful that continuous blaze
that
roll
Rose is about to be found from the prizes.
That's
finds the Rose up
huge.
from the prizes.
More Fire Energy is never bad either.
And remember, Otavio absolutely reset stamping at some point in this turn, but because that Rosa was found through the prizes, that's going to be one more shot that you can find in your deck as you shuffle in and draw 3 cards. Finds the 3rd Water Energy for this Keldeo GX. This Keldeo GX cannot wait to get its Sonic Edge on against this Charizard.
Of course, hitting for weakness so that he can reach that Charizard for an instant knockout.
Stellar Wish finds an escape board.
He's literally just thinning cards at this point. As we've said at this stage, he's got a manual attachment. He's using his 2nd reset stamp. He only plays 2, so nothing else in his deck matters. He is literally going to win the game as long as he doesn't get knocked out. Well, one of his tag teams knocked out next turn. So all he has to do is reset stamp at this stage, retreat into Keldeo, and take that knockout, put himself 1 attack away from closing the game and making Andre have a monster turn.
Indeed. Remember that reset stamp shuffling Andre's hand back into his deck and only allowing him to draw 3 cards because he's got 3 prizes remaining. 3 cards are all Andre's going to have access to. He does not have a Salazzle in play yet. This is going to be a very important draw here for Andre. Does he find what he needs? He looks to have...
I don't know about that.
Yeah,
I think the Salazzle was there, but I didn't think any fires.
A chance to look at it. Remember, he still has Jirachi.
Yeah, he gave us
There's
a quick
still a Fiery
flash,
Flint.
but not the full deal.
There's a Fire Energy in his hand.
Okay,
there's the
Salazzle
Salazzle.
Fire kicks us off.
Fire to draw 3 first.
Okay.
Looks like a Pokemon communication, maybe? No Rosa yet, though.
No Rosa. We see Energy Recycler.
I don't know if you do that before using Stellar Wish, though.
Yeah. Tell me about it.
Maybe getting a tiny bit ahead of himself.
It's a strange spot for him. I don't think he got the ideal combination of cards. He does still play a Ninetales in his deck. He doesn't play any Vulpix. He just plays Ditto for Ninetales.
Yeah.
So if you can try and go for maybe a stalling play on the Lucario Melmetal, that could be really his only way to buy himself a turn here. I can't see how else he can have a turn.
6 minutes left on this clock. Andre Pimenta may have to scoop these cards up, given his hand.
Ooh, his
Looks
hand
like that
is
Heat
really
Factory
awful.
is just going
He
to do
needs to
nothing.
He needs to find a great catcher off of this Stellar Wish to buy himself a turn. Hopefully buy himself a turn.
Yeah. There's 5 cards coming out of the Stellar Wish. You're absolutely right.
If you see any
He
fire
doesn't really-
energies, you know
Yeah.
you know when to be tilted.
All right, looks like
Oh,
it
man.
looks like this is going to be the end of this game. I don't think that there's any way around this. Andre Pimenta does lose this second game against Otavio Gouveia, and with 5 minutes and 40 seconds left on the clock, this probably favors Otavio a tiny bit going into the timed rounds or whatever.
Yeah.
But really, I think that this is almost inevitably going to end up a draw.
Well, ironically, we've seen how few attacks are required to win the game, so it could
Sure.
still conclude, in theory, depending on how these next few minutes go and how quickly they are to set up for Game
Right.
3. So I
With
don't think
Otavio going second,
Yeah.
he could get a turn 1 altered creation.
exactly,
And then
exactly.
3 more turns later. But with so little time left on the clock,
Yeah.
especially if there's no scoop right now,
Mhm.
it seems like it's going to be an unlikely end, but it's not out of the question.
Right. So he actually, with that Fire Crystal pickup from the Jirachi, he can evolve into the Ninetales and go for the gusting effect this way
Does
round.
he have a Ninetales in hand?
Yeah, Ninetales is on the board now.
Yep. You're not wrong.
So he can still force Otavio to have a switching effect.
Lucario and Melmetal already has an escape board on it.
It has a 3 retreat cost, though, so
Yeah.
it would force a switch or a Malo and Lana.
But even then, I mean, if you just attach a water energy or something along those lines to the Lucario and Melmetal, then you still... Well, no, actually, it seems pretty likely that Andre's going to be able to get a knockout
Right.
on his following turn.
So
There's
he
that
picks up a Rosa. He's yet to play a supporter. Remember, he's only drawn cards via Salazzle so far. So he can use this Rosa. He can rare candy Charizard and just hope that this gusting effect sticks on the Lucario Melmetal. Oh no, yeah, he hasn't used a supporter
He
yet.
has not used a supporter yet.
Yeah, so he, in theory, he puts Otavio on a 1-turn clock, but we know that Otavio's hand is pretty large right now, and I'm almost certain there's a Malo and Lana in there at the very least.
Yeah, there's a lot of ways for Otavio to get that Lucario and Melmetal out of that active position. So it does seem like it's kind of a long shot, but at the same time, it's your best bet if you're Andre.
Can you can't rare candy Charizard, Roaring Resolve, attach, and take a knockout with Heatran this turn, can you?
No.
Maybe. Is there any way that you can do it? He has manual attachment. He needs it's one item too many for him to find off of the Rosa. If he had rare candy if he had either rare candy or switch in his hand, he would be able to get there.
Okay.
But Rosa only allowing you to get that 1 trainer card. I think he was 1 card off game this turn with Heatran. Burning Road, stealing all his energies for himself. Would have been the only way to do it. I don't think he gets there, though. Yeah, I think he's just like a card away, so he's going to go for the 9 Temptations instead.
But I mean, we're talking about Keldeo here too, you know?
Yeah, it would have to be the Ninetales gusting effect also.
Yeah. Okay.
So yeah, he's going to try and trap this Lucario Melmetal. Finding that Charmeleon means that, as soon as he finds a Roaring Resolve Charizard next turn, he's got that switch in hand to play, so he can go for any
switch,
knockout.
yep.
And yeah, Otavio shows
All
the switch
right.
straight away.
Good
We're heading
show
to
of
game 3.
sportsmanship between these two players, and of course that means that both of these players are now going to be 1-1 going into Game 3 with very little time left on this clock. This is going to have to be a very fast-paced Game 3, and we're going to have to see some minor miracles happen in order for one of these players to come out on top. With that said, we've seen ADP before. We've seen ADP kind of just burn through one of its opponents in very, very few turns.
Right.
We're talking about single-digit minutes on the clock, so it's not out of the question.
And if both players are aware of the time, they've got to be playing at a rapid pace. I mean, a tie isn't ideal for them when they're both on 19 match points.
Right.
Maybe if they were already higher, they would feel a bit more content with the tie and sort of move on to the next round. But they really got to be taking W's here if they want to make the push for top 8.
Yeah, I mean, the truth is that we've already talked about this, and we felt like at 4-1, if you're at 6-2-1 or an equivalent win record, at that point you start feeling like there's a very good chance that you're going to be top 8ing. But if you get a draw, then that's out of the question. At that point, you have to go 4-0-1.
Right.
Which means that's basically your loss for the day.
Yeah, it really does feel rough for them. It looks like there was also a mulligan, which really doesn't help matters when time is such a big factor here for both of them. Seems to be running out. Andre, of course, getting to go first. He's got himself a couple of basics.
We've now seen 2 games out of this Charizard deck, though, and we've seen both when things go right and when things go wrong.
Exactly. it's just the difference between rare candy and not rare candy, essentially.
Right.
It's the age-old problem of Stage 2 decks, and Arceus Palkia Dialga punishes more than most decks, because normally you are a single prizer, you have time to sacrifice Jirachis here and there, but Arceus Palkia and Dialga just gives you no time to do those sorts of things.
I think we've also seen why this Charizard deck has 4 draws as well.
That's also very true.
These games go long. There's no such thing as like a quick win for this deck, really. Even its quickest wins are full of many plays on a single turn. Despite it being a one-hit KO, it requires a lot of inputs, so to speak. Which means if you're in Andre's seat, you're probably assuming that this is going to be a draw too, but you still want to play it out. You still want to give yourself a shot at maybe beating your opponent who if he has a poor hand or something along those lines.
Yep.
It's happened before.
See
It'll
the
happen
prize
again.
cards come down here.
Hands resolve, of course.
A couple of them to slow him down in terms of tempo, potentially.
Now,
Let's see,
looks like
Mulligan.
Andre will be going first, of course.
And a draw for turn.
Yep. So after that one mulligan, we get 2 cards here drawn for Andre, which, okay, there's that handshake. We're about to start game 3. I believe it's a Charmander start here for Andre.
Mulligans. Okay.
It was 2 mulligans. Wow.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's looking like a Charmander start here for Andre. Of course.
Wow. Professor Oak
Oak
setup. There he is.
So Otavio's going to have to play a full game here in order to win. And so is Andre. It looks like our timer is down to 0 minutes. It could potentially mean that time has been called. If it has, then it's even more unlikely that this game is going to end in anything but a draw. But if it hasn't, then there's going to be that shot at one of these players coming out on top. Remember, both of them at 6-2-1, both of them splitting 1 game apiece, or 6-2-1 equivalent, I should say, with 5-0-4 record here for Andre. And okay, so it looks like the timer is now correct, and we are going to 0 by the end of this turn for sure. Andre's turn is unlikely to end in the next 2 seconds. So
well,
now,
it's pretty close. I think he's going to probably pay retreat and go for a Stellar Wish.
Yeah, I bet if Andre would have known that there was like 5 seconds left on the clock, he would have immediately passed the turn.
Yeah.
All right, but that is going to be the end of Andre's turn here as he attaches onto the Charmander. And
looks like both players have heard that the time's been called.
Indeed, so Otavio going to be turn 1.
Oftentimes when players are on stream, they'll continue to play just because, it's their moment. So let them have it and don't sort of question why they're still playing, even though, theoretically, neither player could win. At the moment, Otavio only has 2 Pokemon in play, so there is a means of Andre finding a win condition, in theory. So, yeah.
You're not wrong.
We'll just let it go.
That's still the possibility. And remember that, I think both of these players are still, trying to get comfortable in their seats. Like, this is only game 1 of day 1, and if you're going to be in top 8, then not only do you have to go through 4 more Swiss rounds, but potentially another 2 matches before the end of the day.
Mm-hmm.
So you kind of want to get comfortable. You want to feel the cards in your hand for a little bit longer, even though that may sound silly to some. The truth is that comfort really, really does matter when it comes to playing optimal Pokemon. And now Andre starts his turn with a Welder, puts 2 more Fire Energies onto this Charmander. Forced to retreat the Charmander, though, likely going to be promoting the Jirachi, and a Stellar Wish will likely mean a little bit less explosion out of this Charizard deck, unless that Stellar Wish really helps him out. Going to need a switch effect to go with the Charizard here.
Looks like we're looking down a tie right now. pretty certain at this point.
There's a switch. I do agree. But that switch will be found by the Jirachi Stellar Wish. Remember, that could mean that we could see a Charizard knockout here before the end of the turn. Going to need a Rare Candy and a Charizard and a Fire Energy in hand.
Yep, those are the combo pieces in combination with the Roaring Resolve. We've seen it so many times where he's hit that magical number. We're seeing more Jirachis in the field, more Stellar Wishes, I think.
Yeah, it looks like going to have to Stellar Wish again.
Making the most out of the time.
So another Stellar Wish. Not uncommon to see these Stellar Wishes kind of played in pairs. Really, Jirachi gets better the more you can Stellar Wish him, obviously.
For sure.
But that's where having multiples comes into play, and now we see the escape board come from the top of the deck and straight onto this Jirachi. So now Jirachi can retreat for free whenever it would like.
Yeah, he's already done the Charmander retreat this turn. So I think he's just doing it knowing that Otavio probably would just GX attack anyways. But I think more or less they're just kind of going through the motions at this point. They both know the situation that they're in, I'm sure.
Sure, and we see a less than stellar hand with the exception of that welder there. We see that rare candy just, raring to go, but there is no Charizard in sight. Forced to just attach onto another Charmander. Passes the turn over to Otavio.
Yep.
Otavio now going to get his first attack off of the game, potentially.
Going to see the Cynthia and Caitlyn. Discards the Great Catcher, grabs that Cynthia that he used on the first turn. 3 more cards for him.
On the tag call.
Don't think he has any water energy, so he can't even do the GX attack for the full value right now.
How interesting would this game have been if it would have been if they would have been able to play it
really,
out? It looks like
yeah.
Andre would have potentially ran away with it, but at the same time, this is a kind of a small window here for Otavio to really put some pressure on Andre.
Exactly. We're going to see the tag call, getting a Lucario Melmetal out of the deck, just thinning it before going for a Dede change by the looks of things from Otavio here. Doing all he can. Obviously, he wants to hit the water energy if possible, so he can go for an Altered Creation GX attack this turn. There's not much else he could really do. And looking at how Andre's board is looking, you can see how he can take a lot of victories against this archetype, because there would just be 2 energies in play for Otavio. He'd go for the GX attack, and then the only real way, if Otavio takes that knockout, it would have to be like another end resolve into a second Arceus Palkia Dialga, which again is just 3 prizer into 3 prizer. So you can definitely see how this deck can be a problem for the Arceus Palkia Dialga archetype. He does find himself a water energy. There's also the tag call. He can just, again, thin the deck out. I really do like the tag call engine being incorporated in this list. Otavio is one of the players with the high Mallow and Lana counts. No doubt that's a helpful card in mirror match situations, which I'm sure he's encountered on the first day. Probably going to be encountering them later on today as well.
It almost feels tailor-made for this deck, really, the tag call engine.
All right,
and there's that handshake. Both players agree. There is no way for either of these players to actually come out with a win, but because they each won a game apiece, that will mean that they're both going to be getting 1 match point to end this round as they get a draw, which is going to be the, I believe, 5th draw here for Andre.
Still undefeated.
Still undefeated. The undefeated Andre Pimenta with his Charizard deck, Stage 2 Charizard deck, earning a draw against Otavio Gouveia and the most popular deck in day 2, ADP.
Yeah, I think realistically, chat, I think be aware that there is most likely going to be a good amount of ADP being played over today and probably moving on